Welcome to the webinar on this is the workflow webinar, improving your workflow. I've broken down today's webinar into three basic sections. So one being VersaWorks, one being some settings that you can do on your machine. And then I've got a couple of other bits, which are kind of other softwares or apps that can help you as well. The majority of this is via VersaWorks. VersaWorks, your RIP that runs your machine, as long as you are all using VersaWorks or whichever RIP you are using, is the front end. That's the communication device between you and your printer. So most of the workflow tips will be on that, how to improve your day-to-day via the software, basically. So we'll kick off. I am going to whiz through some of these points quite quickly because I've got quite a lot to get through. So I'm just going to zip through. If you do have any comments, pop them into the chat box. And we'll try and address those as we go along. If not, we'll address them at the end. In one sort of Q&A session. So just pop them in or save them till the end. And also have a think about if there's any workflow improvements that we don't mention today that we can share as a group a little bit later on. So first of all, we're going to jump over into VersaWorks here. And I am actually using a VG2, which is a newish product, the TrueViz VG2 for this demonstration. So hopefully on your screens, you should be able to see a VG2 set up in VersaWorks 6. And the first point that I'm going to mention is the fact that we have 5 queues. So this was introduced fairly recently into VersaWorks, the fact that we have these 5. So we've got A, B, C, D, and E on any of our devices. So you can see that I've got a VG2, an LAF2 and a BN20 installed into my VersaWorks. And if I flick between these queues, I've got 5 different queues. All of my jobs at the moment are in my queue A. The benefit of having these 5 queues is that you can set up each with presets or each for a particular job or a particular file type or whatever it might be. So you can choose to set up or use as many as you want for different processes. So say, for example, you could have one job for your repeat customers, or one queue, sorry, for your repeat customers. You could have one queue for all of the jobs that you have that need white ink. Or, you cannot see your screen on mine. Oh, sorry, someone's just popped into the comments there that they can't see my screen. Let me just try and refresh a moment, and we'll see if it comes back up, because it should do. Bear with us a moment. You guys should be able to see VersaWorks come up on your screens. Let's see if we can do that now. Has that popped up yet? Hopefully, you guys can see VersaWorks now. Just let me know in the chat box there if you guys can see that. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I just had to do a little refresh there. So we've got these 5 queues, which basically means that you can set them up for whatever your desired workflow is. So say, for example, as I said, you could set up one for all your print jobs, one for your print and cut jobs, one for your white then color jobs, one for your jobs that need laminating before cutting, whatever it might be. Or it could be that you set them up for different customers or different days of the week, whatever it might be. So these 5 queues you can access just by flipping along the tabs in VersaWorks. And another huge benefit of having these 5 queues is that you can set up hot folders for each of these queues. So a hot folder works as an input to these queues. So I don't know how you guys are working at the moment, but I imagine that you're probably importing your jobs into VersaWorks by going into VersaWorks and going to File, Add Job to the queue. So File, Add Job to queue A, Add Job to queue B, Add Job to queue C, or maybe even just importing jobs by dragging and dropping them as well. But what we can do is, if I go into the edit menu, and go to queue settings at the top there and go to QA, for example, it's going to open up a window. Now, if you just bear with me a minute. I'm just going to have to refresh my screen. It's just sharing my main application, not my additional windows. So just bear with me a minute. Just going to redo this a moment. So it should just be refreshing at your end. Hopefully in a moment, though, you will now be able to see VersaWorks and the QA properties window. Yeah, it looks like that should have popped up. So I've opened up the QA properties, and this looks very similar to your normal job settings window that you open. So basically anything that I change here will become default for my QA settings. So any future jobs that I bring into my QA will automatically take on the settings from this queue. It will not, however, change any of the jobs already in my QA. It's just going to affect future jobs when I import them into QA. So say, for example, we're always printing onto a specific material. So my QA is always for banner. I could change it to generic banner. And when I print banners, I always print at high speed. So I've changed that to high speed. It's a very simple setting, but it's very, you normally change that every single day. So what I've done is just change that for my QA. And that means now it says the printing settings for QA have been changed. Save the settings. Yes. That now means that any job that I bring into QA in the future will automatically be set up ready to print on banner. So it's a very small change, but it's something that would, build up day on day, I guess. And you can do that for each of your queues. So that was I said we were doing hot folders. I was doing my queue settings just then, so I'm getting myself muddled up here. So edit queue settings. This means that every time that I bring in a job into any of those queues, it already takes on a certain amount of settings. I did mention hot folders though. So a hot folder means that when we're in our queue settings, so again, let's go into a different queue this time. We'll go into our QB settings. When we are in our QB settings, if we go down to this little clock symbol, which is the job management folder, this is where we can set up a hot folder, which means instead of running around with USB sticks or trying to load jobs one by one each time, what I can do here is choose a folder on my network and choose that as the input for that queue. So in future, any file that I would save into that folder would automatically open into VersaWorks. So I've chosen QB here for my settings, and I've opened up this little window. And at the top here, it says input folder. If I click on the three little dots at the end, I can then choose a new input folder. So if I go on to one of my drives here, go into my folder, into Academy. I've actually got I've got one folder in here that says LEF input QB. So that's where I've already set up an input folder. So basically any folder that you create on a shared drive that you can access from the computer that's running your machine, you can choose an input folder. So if I choose that one, it's a slightly different folder, but it doesn't matter. I'll just choose that for this example. I then have an action that says save job, delete rip data, or delete job. That just means that after I've imported that job and I've printed it, what do I want to happen to the job? Save job just means it stays within the queue. So that would be my default setting for myself. And the next bit says action, do nothing, rip only, or rip and print. So what I could do is if I ever save, or anybody in my building, so at the moment I'm at Roland DG headquarters and I'm in the Academy training room. If anybody upstairs or anybody in our creative center saved a file now into that folder, that LEFQB input folder, it would automatically take that file and bring it into QB in VersaWorks. So you could have designers or multiple people within your workplace having access to one folder, which means they just save a copy of a file into that folder and it automatically opens. If I set it to do nothing, the top option there, that just means that it's just going to open that job into QB. I could get it to automatically rip the data. So if I've already changed my queue settings, which we just went through, perfectly set up for my banner printing, for example, then I could get it to automatically rip the data or automatically rip and print. So a good example of this would be, say, for example, the printer's set up with a 50-meter roll of banner, and all I've got is a bunch of banner jobs coming in. I can sit in a different room, and I can just be saving those jobs into my queue, sending them to the printer via my hot folder, and they automatically go into my QB, and they're all just ripping and printing. So I don't even need to be near the machine to check it out or set it up or any of that stuff. You just set it up onto your take-up unit once, and then you set up your hot folders, and you can just keep sending jobs without having to go near the machine. So it can be, if set up correctly, a really, really, really good time saver. You could even go to a stage advanced as having a web portal where you receive orders. Those files get taken from your website and saved into a folder. That folder automatically takes them into VersaWorks, into a certain queue, and automatically rips and prints them. In which case, you've got a fully automated print process from customer order through to print as well. So you can get that advanced with hot folders. If I choose to do nothing though, for example, I can get it to also automatically nest jobs together. and I can get it to nest them by either time, paper length, or number of jobs, or a combination of those. So again, I could say by the time that that folder receives 5 jobs, I want it to nest those jobs together and print those 5 jobs. So using your hot folders for your different queues and setting up your queue settings means that you can save quite a lot of time by just those small changes that you make every time you're loading a job. Hopefully that will make sense to you guys. So just as a quick recap, we've got your edit queue settings where you set up the default settings for each of your queues. And then if you go into those queue settings for any of the queues and you go down to the job management, this is where you can set up your hot folders using an input folder. One key thing to note is that that is an input folder, which means that as you save a file into that folder, it's going to leave the folder and go into VersaWorks. So it's not a storage location. So if I did save the only file that I have of a file copy into that folder and it goes into VersaWorks and prints, I then lose the file. So just make sure that you always save a copy into that folder, okay? Because they disappear from the folder when they finished printing. So hopefully that will make sense to you guys. That was a quick introduction to using your queues and to hot folders. So next, what we're going to go through is where you can set certain settings. So things such as your feed calibration on your device. Your feed calibration is a test that you can do on the menu panel on your machine. And you print out a bunch of little gray squares and you choose a value for your feed calibration. Now, what most people I find tend to do is they save that on the machine, meaning that when you then change a material, you then have to change the feed calibration setting on the machine again, which is okay. But if you have to keep printing the test print and you have to keep changing the values each time, obviously that's going to be time consuming. So we want to try and take away that time if possible. So what we can do is we can change that setting in 2 other places within VersaWorks. So one of those being, again, within the queue settings. So if I went edit queue settings, and this time I'm just going to go into a different queue. I'm going to go into my QC settings. What I could then do within my QC settings is, if I go down to the printer controls setting, okay, the little spanner symbol here, and at the top it says feed calibration controls. If I choose to use the printer setting, that means that if I have taken my calibration setting from my machine, or I've set it on my machine, VersaWorks will take it from the machine. But if I change my default for QC to say use a custom setting, and I enter a specific value that I've read from the test on my printer, it means that every time I print onto whatever material I've set up for my QC, the feed calibration value will be correct. Every future job that I bring in, I don't have to worry about changing the value on my machine. So you can either change it on the machine and change each time you load a different role. You can change it via your queue setting and just make sure that you import the correct job into the correct material within your queues. So you can split your queues by material. And finally, there is another place that you can change this setting, and that is within the Media Explorer. So if I go into the Media Explorer, this is where your profiles are kept. If I open up my Media Explorer, what I'm just going to quickly do is make a copy of generic vinyl 1 here, which is one of my profiles. So I'm going to change generic vinyl 1 and I'm going to create a copy and I'm going to call it Joe's Vinyl. Okay, so I've created a new vinyl setting down the bottom here. It's at the moment, it's got all of the exact same settings as my generic vinyl setting. But if I double click on this, it opens up the printer control settings and the cut control settings. So what I can do here is I could say, I'm going to change the feed calibration within the profile setting here. I'm also going to change the heater settings because I've done some tests. And for example, this material doesn't quite need as much heat on the printer or the dryer. So I'm just going to tweak that a tiny bit. Okay. If I click on OK now and come out of my Media Explorer, what I'm now going to do is go into my edit queue settings for my QC, and I'm going to tell my QC to take the feed calibration controls from the default media setting. and I'm going to change the quality settings to Joe's Vinyl. So now every time I'm going to print on Joe's Vinyl, I'm going to choose to import my job into QC, and it's automatically going to take the correct feed calibration control from the profile setting this time. So again, it's just a different route of being able to access that information. So there's a number of different ways. Any one of those three might work for you, but they might just save you, 5 minutes, 10 minutes each day from all of your jobs, again, improving your workflow. Okay, so that was queues, hot folders, and changing some of your settings either within the profile or within VersaWorks. Next, we're going to talk about something where you can duplicate a job within VersaWorks. So if I just have got a job, so let's look, for example, down here, I've got a job that says logo cut and bleed here within VersaWorks. Hey, AJ, thanks for joining us. Don't worry, you haven't missed too much. And we've got lots still to go through, so thanks for joining us. Sorry, we've got somebody just joined us late. So this logo cut and bleed job, let's say, for example, that I actually wanted to make 2 copies of this job. Rather than importing the job twice, what I can do now is right-click and go to duplicate job. Let's call this one logo cut and bleed small, for example. Now I've got these 2 jobs, and what I'm going to do is highlight both of them by using the control key and clicking on both of them, and I'm going to nest those together. If I open up my nest, now what I've got is 2 of the same job. Let's just bring that over there. So I've got 2 of the same job. That's not 2 copies, it's 2 versions of the same job nested together. So one of them, I'm going to say I was going to make it smaller. So I want one of them only at 20%, but I want 20 copies. Okay, and then the bigger one I want to print at 250%. Okay, so I've got 2 different jobs nested together, but all I did was import one job and then duplicate those. So basically you can create copies of a single job and then you can duplicate them. This is also really useful for if you've got white ink within your machine. So say, for example, if I just jump down to my LAF here in VersaWorks, I've got a sample here that's a white sample, but it's also got some color within it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to change the setting to just printing white only for my first print. Okay. What I'm then going to do is duplicate the job. And for the second job, so there's just a copy of the first job, this one is going to be, let's go white, then CMYK. And it's got exactly the same settings as the first job. So what that would mean is that I could print the first job white only, then I could print the second copy of exactly the same one, white and color, which effectively gives me a double hit of white before putting the color down. So you can duplicate jobs just for repeating different types of jobs or different types, or renaming it within VersaWorks as well. There's a bunch of different functions for using that duplicate job feature. Okay. Next function, custom cut. So I don't know how much you guys know about custom cut or whether you already use custom cut, but what we're going to do is we're just going to unnest the job that I just nested together, which was my logo with a cut and a bleed. It's the Academy logo. And I'm just going to open up this job. Now, normally what would happen is if we just scale this down a bit, you can see it's maintained the 250% because it was in a nested version from just before. So I'm actually going to take this down to, let's go down to 100% again. And I'm going to create a number of copies. So I'm going to create 30 copies of this job. Now, when I create my 30 copies, let's just move this off the screen for you there. When I create my 30 copies, that media length, if I take a look at that, is just about 3 meters. You can see down by the ruler there, that's 2,850, so 2.9 meters down the end there. And what would happen there is my machine would print the whole 2.9 meters, then it would wind back, and then it would start cutting them out. So what we can do to improve the accuracy and make it so that I can do all of these 30 jobs in one go. Because what some people might do if they did these 30 jobs is to keep the accuracy and maybe do sort of 6 at a time. So do the top row and then they just resend the job. So they'd set up the job with 6 copies. So let's just do that a second, 6 copies. And then they'd keep sending that job one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, which again takes time, meaning that you've got to keep going back to the machine. So what we're going to do is set it up with 30 copies. We're going to hit get media width, which reads the width of material within the machine. I'm not sure if I'm actually connected to the machine next door. So just for example, I'm just going to change that to 1450. Okay. And what you'll see is the preview is just adjusted there in VersaWorks to show that my width is now 1450. Okay. And what I'm going to do is copy that value, 1450. Now we're going to change the size of the roll from custom roll to custom cut. And what you'll see is the width has just reverted back to 1.6 meters, which is the width of the machine. So what I need to do is paste the value of the media that I actually have installed, which we just read. Now what I'm going to do is choose the height of my custom cut. Effectively, what we're going to do is we're going to batch this down into more smaller sections, and I'm actually going to batch it into batches of 6 as per that original job. So I know that the height of my job is 297 millimeters. So I'm going to call it 300 because it's easier. So if we go 300 times 6, times 2. So because we're only going 2 deep, so 600, and we'll add on a little bit because we've actually got a tiny gap between them as well. So let's call that 610. So I'm going to put in 610 millimeters into the height of my custom cut. Now what you'll see on the screen, if I just zoom out a little bit, is that now it's broken each of these pages down into 6 jobs per page. So what would happen now is that the machine would print the 6 jobs, then it would cut them all out, then it would move on to the next 6. Print 6, cut 6, move on. Which means I don't have to do anything, okay? I don't have to come back and resend the job. It's just going to complete the whole job, but it's going to do them sort of in batches of 6, if you will. Another benefit of that is that if you're waiting for this job to complete, when it's completed its first 6, you could come across and chop off those 6 with a pair of scissors and go and take them off and start prepping them whilst the others are still printing. Better still, on the VG2, you could put cut sheet after output as in your settings in VersaWorks, and it would automatically chop each of those off for you, saving you the time of running across with your scissors. So you just have batches of 6 coming off the machine one after the other. So custom cut, a really, really great tool for saving you on time on longer print and cut jobs. And another interesting point on that is that if you've got a print and cut device after the VersaCam SPI, any of the ones after that, you can actually do this on the take-up unit as well. So you can have jobs going overnight, printing and cutting for super long jobs of print and cut. Okay, so that's custom cut. Another one to do with cutting then. Sometimes people have longer runs of print and cut jobs that they want to put crop marks on for doing print, laminate, and then cut. So let's use that same job as an example. Let's open it up and let's just make it a little bit smaller again. And let's say we want 12 copies. If I go down to the marks tab here, normally under the print crop marks for print and cut alignment, you just have one option. And that's where it would put 4 dots in the corners of that whole job. And it would use those for alignment when printing and cutting after lamination. So print, laminate, and then cut. With the new VG2, you've got this option to change how those crop marks are added. So you can put them to each row. Now, hopefully you can see here that what it's actually done in the preview is put crop marks around each row of jobs. It's going to take a little bit longer because it has to read the crop marks on each job, but it's going to maintain that accuracy over a much longer distance. So if we did have that original 30 jobs, we could just take those, print them, laminate them, and then put them back into cut, and it would do that huge long set for us. You can also do it around each data entry. So it's going to put crop marks around each box as well. Again, that's going to take quite a bit longer. But again, if your accuracy is super important and these are quite big, long runs that you're doing, that will keep it perfect over an extended period or an extended length. Okay, so that is custom cut and the different crop mark options. Hopefully you guys are keeping up. As I said, I'm going to whiz through these today, but don't fear. As I said, this session is going to be recorded, so you will be able to watch this back. And if I'm talking too quickly or if you've missed one of the options that I've chosen, you'll be able to watch the video back afterwards. Okay, next we've got something, again, in VersaWorks. If I go to my spot color settings, so I've gone to the edit menu and to the spot color settings. Now, this is a bit of a niche one, but it might work for some of you. So what I've done is, what I'm going to do, is I'm going to create a new spot color library. Now, it's going to ask me for a library name. So this could be for a specific customer. It could be for my online orders, whatever it might be. So let's say online orders for my library. And what I'm going to do is choose an alias of special inks. Now, what this means is if you've got white ink or gloss ink, if you've got a UV machine or metallic ink, what we can do is set up a new spot color library. So this is for my online orders. And what I'm going to do is create a new spot color. So what I'm going to put here is white under the spot color name and the special ink RDG_white. Effectively, what this means, if anybody sends me artwork from my online orders and they've used a spot color called just white, VersaWorks will recognize it and swap it for actual white ink. Because normally with white ink, the spot color has to be named RDG_white in order for VersaWorks to recognize it. So this way, I'm just setting up additional color options that my customers tend to use and telling it what to do with that color. And this was for special colors, okay? So at the moment, I've chosen it for white. If somebody uses a different spot color, maybe they use a spot color, a Pantone spot color, I could then tell it to change that Pantone for white as well. What I'm now going to do is create another spot library. Okay, this one we'll call a specific customer number 1. And in this time, I'm going to choose the CMYK color space. Okay, so I'm just going to create this new library. Oh, so as well, there we go. VersaWorks just decided to crash on me. Always tends to happen when you're doing a demo. Just bear with me a minute. I am doing quite a lot on this computer at the moment, so it's probably got I've got the webinar running and everything as well. So let me just jump back in there a second. Edit spot colors. Right, let's just create that new library again. Sorry. So customer 1. And the color space we're going to use is CMYK. There we go. Hopefully you guys still got that now. So customer number 1, this time when I choose to create my color, I'm going to say that either when it's got a specific spot color name, I'm going to change the spot color for a specific CMYK set of values, or I could assign a different spot color. So again, I could choose from from the Roland Color Systems library, for example. I'm going to choose RVWDP11F, which is a green, and I'm going to say when they choose their green spot color to use that specific Roland color. So this might seem a little bit out there at the moment, or maybe you can't think of 101 uses for it, but it can be useful for specific customers and specific clients, meaning that when they use specific colors, you can come in here and you can change those colors when the file is imported without having to open up the design file. Basically, that's the sort of the quicker part of it for you. That's how it can improve your workflow. Quick question just came in there on the chat asking where can you watch these webinars back? They're all on our website at rolanddg.co.uk. And then if you go up to the training tab and you go down to webinars on demand, there's a bunch of our old webinars there, and this one will be up there shortly. And I'll also email all of the guys who logged in for this webinar or who registered for this webinar as well with a link to the webinar when it's up and running. So, okay, that was a quick bit about what's called alias colors or color replacement, okay, for certain spot colors. Now, on that note of replacing spot colors, there is another place where you can do something similar. So I've got a file here within VersaWorks, which is called spots. And if I just open this file up, you'll see if I go down to the file format tab, that this file has got a number of different spot colors within it. Excuse me. So if I click on the details box here, it's going to list all of the spot colors for me within that file. So let's just make this a little bit bigger. And as you can see, I've got a bunch of different Pantone spot colors. And then I've got a bunch of different Roland spot colors as well. what I could do for these spot colors is, I'm not going to go into too much detail as to what's inside this box because that's for another day. But this spot color, Pantone 265 C, so from the Pantone solid coated library, has got a little warning symbol next to it. That warning symbol means that with the current setup that I've got, the current material and quality that I'm using within VersaWorks, I cannot achieve that Pantone value accurately. So what I might want to do with that Pantone is swap it for another color. So here I have my Roland Color Systems library. We're coming to this in a minute, but I've got my Roland Color Systems library, and what I could do is I could get my Pantone book and I could measure up to the purples, and I could try and find what I think is a better fit for that purple than the one that it's recommending on the screen, or if I printed it and had it to sample. What I would do is choose the color from my Roland Color Systems library. So I've got one here that says RVW PR32H. Okay, that's a Roland color. What I'm going to do is choose that Pantone color, and at the bottom here, I'm going to say edit the output color. I'm going to tell it to use a different spot color library. I'm going to click on select here, and I'm going to change from the Pantone library to the Roland Color Systems library, and then I'd be able to find that color that I just mentioned. Can't remember exactly what it was, but let's say it was this one, RVW DP31G. What's now going to happen is VersaWorks is going to swap the information wherever it sees that Pantone for my Roland spot color. Again, the benefit of this is just within your workflow, you being able to access things and change them within VersaWorks and quickly and accurately get color replication from a printout rather than guessing at what's on screen. So an improvement to your workflow by using the spot color swap out within the file format tab within VersaWorks. Okay, that's another one done. That's the alias colors. And now we'll move on to color matching, in which case we're going to go back to this little chart. So hopefully you guys have seen this chart before, or you know of it. It's called the Roland Color Systems Library. And this is Roland Color Systems Library Type 1. This is a small printout of it. It does normally print quite a bit bigger than this. And in VersaWorks, you can print this out by going to the Media tab, Color Chart Type 1. Okay, that's going to print using whichever Q settings you have set up at that point for your QA. So if we go to Color Chart Type 1, it's going to import into QA. I can then open that job up and print it onto my different materials. This is a really quick and easy way of color matching without having to go backwards and forwards from printouts or customers or whatever it might be. So I've done my printout onto my material. And what I would then do is I would use this for color matching. So I've got a red pen here that I'm going to line up to my red colors, and I'm going to find the best match. Okay. When I found the best match, for me, that's PR40. There's a little table on the top, PR40K, okay, is the best color match for that. All I need to do then is, as I said, you can replace spot colors the way we just did then, or in your design file. So if we just quickly jump over into my design program, I'm actually in Illustrator here at the moment. But if I jump into Illustrator, I've got my Roland Color Systems library set up within Illustrator. What you can then do is create your information, find your spot color. So what did I say? RVW-PR40K. There's my spot color, my red from my Roland Color Systems library. And if I now use this when I print, I know that it's going to print exactly the same as I'm expecting it to from the printout that I already have. So it's a quick and easy way of color matching. By you printing out a color chart, you then choose the color from the color chart, design with that data or use the color swap within VersaWorks, and you can print accurate colors. Super easy. All right, so that's color matching. On to the next one. Super simple one, this one. Don't have a demo for you to show you, but on the new VG2, it's got new media clamps that sit on top of the material that enable you to sheet cut with those media clamps in. So just another time saver. Don't have to take out those media clamps. Means that you can just sheet cut with leaving them in there, and they cut in between these media clamps. So a nice, easy little cheat there. And in VersaWorks, again, you can tell the machine to sheet cut after printing. I think it's in VersaWorks, either in VersaWorks, let's just check, or it's on the machine. Can't remember exactly. Bear with me. I think it's on the machine actually, but you can tell the machine to sheet cut after it's finished printing. So what it'll do, print the set of jobs, sheet cut, print the set of jobs, and sheet cut again. So another sneaky couple of minutes that it might save you a day, I guess. All right, next one is saving and importing. Actually, wait, bear with me. I do think it. I think I was wrong. I think it is in VersaWorks. I just didn't find it accurately then. Cut sheet after output. It's called. Can't find it at the minute. There we go. At the top there. Sorry, there we go. In the printer controls, cut sheet after output. It is in VersaWorks, not on the machine. So there we go. That would then finish one batch, do a sheet cut, finish the next batch, and do a sheet cut. If you are doing that as an option, what you might want to do is change the page space setting. Okay, that means you're going to reduce the amount of waste that there is in between each sheet cut as well. Sorry, little sidestep there. So that was using the automatic sheet cutting setting, especially on a VG2, because you don't have to remove the media clamps before doing your sheet cut. Next option, after a quick sip of my tea, it's saving and importing jobs. Again, this is a great time saver. So we're in VersaWorks again, and I'm just going to go into this job and I'm going to make a few changes to it. So this job, we have some material that is, let's say, 1.3 meters wide, and we're going to make the job 50% of its original size, and we want 25 copies. There we go. Quick question just came in there. Great question. Can you sheet cut after output on a BN20? Unfortunately not, because the BN20 doesn't have a sheet cut function. What you can do though is still use that custom cut function, and then it would do one batch. You can cut it off manually, and then it will do the next batch. You just don't have the automatic sheet cutting function, unfortunately. Where are we? Saving and importing. Right, so I've made some changes to this job. Now I'm going to jump over and I'm going to change this to generic vinyl 2. I'm just making some changes, doesn't matter what these are. At high speed, for example, and I'm going to choose the sign and display color settings for this job. I'm also going to change it to cut then print. Okay, this is a new feature where the machine will cut first before printing. It's just a different option for, it's supposed to give you the option to reduce media curl on certain types of material where ink can draw up the edges, that kind of thing. So you'd cut first and then print after. So I'm going to change it to cut and then print. So basically I've just made a bunch of changes to my job in VersaWorks. If I now click on OK, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the save button down the bottom here. So I'm going to save this job. I'm just going to stick it onto my desktop, and I'm just going to name it its default file name. And I'm going to save it as a VersaWorks file. Okay, save that onto my desktop. What I can now do is I can delete the original job out of my queue, which keeps my queue nice and tidy, so I don't have loads of excess jobs in there. And this time I'm going to go add job to QA within VersaWorks, and I'm going to find that job on my desktop, which is here. When I import that job into VersaWorks, there we go, that's just imported. If I now open it up, it's going to have retained all of the settings that I changed before I saved it. So for repeat customers or repeat jobs, this is a great setting because you create the file once, you then save it, and then next time when you import the job, it's already got the same settings, the same number of copies, the same quality settings as when you originally did the job. It also means that you're not going to mix match down the line, so you're not going to have slightly different color settings, or you're going to change the scaling and not get it right. Next time that customer returns, I can just say, right, I'm just going to print another 30 or another 25. I could even change the number of copies. You know, this time they've come back and actually they only want 14 copies. You can still make changes to it, but it's going to take the existing settings from when you saved that job. So one thing to remember, I saved that as a VersaWorks file, which means that the artwork for this original job, the original EPS or PDF, it was a PDF. If I move that original job from my computer, that VersaWorks file I will not be able to import it because it's looking in my original location for that job. So when I go to save, there is another option where I can choose the next one in the drop-down list, which says VW job plus source file. It's going to be a larger saved file, but what it's going to do is incorporate the artwork, the design file, into the saved VersaWorks file, which means that regardless of whether I have the original artwork or not, that file will always be usable. I can always bring it into VersaWorks and reuse it, and it would still have all the main settings. Okay, so it's duplicating on file space, because if I've got the original and I've got that file, it's just more storage space, but I do have a file that works regardless of whether I have that customer file. So two different options there. VersaWorks file means that you still have the existing artwork and it's in the same location. If you do move it, VersaWorks will give you the chance to relink it when you import the job. But if you've deleted it, that VersaWorks file is useless. So you can save that as a VersaWorks file, which is a tiny, tiny file, or you can save it as a VersaWorks plus source, which will be a larger file depending on the size of the artwork that's incorporated within it. Hopefully that all made sense. Whizzed through that one pretty quick. So that was saving and importing. Okay, next, another workflow tip, which is more to do with your hardware, more to do with your printer, but it does have an option within VersaWorks. So with my VG2 again, if I go at the top here and I go to the printer settings, this is actually the connection to my device. Now what we've got is something called nozzle masking. So say, for example, you do your test print on one morning and some of the nozzles are missing from your test print, which means in effect that you're not going to be able to print your job because it's not going to have the right quality because some of the nozzles aren't working. So say, for example, you haven't cleaned your machine properly and some of your nozzles are out. What you can now do on this machine is go into the printer settings and go to the advanced tab. And on the machine, sorry, before you do this, you've got a nozzle mask test print, which prints out a little test print and shows you where in the print head your nozzles are missing from. What you can then do is come into here and you can mask off that section of the print head, meaning that you can still print, but it just won't use that portion of the print head where your nozzles are missing. It will take a little bit longer to print because it's not using the whole print head, but you'll be able to get on with your work until you manage to get the problem fixed with your nozzles. So it's called nozzle masking. You access it via the printer settings, and first of all, you do a test print on the machine to choose which portion of your nozzles you want to mask off, either 1, 2, or 3. There we go. So another little neat feature which should enable you to carry on printing should you have nozzle dropout on your machine. All right, that is it for VersaWorks for a minute. Now we're going to move on to hardware a little bit. So I mentioned about using the queues for your presets. So being able to set up each queue as a specific setup for a specific material or something along the lines of that. What we're now going to move on to is, I'm just going to jump onto the bigger webcam view here so I can talk to you, is doing this on your machine. When you go onto your device, if you've got a menu panel, or if you're on a BN20, it's slightly different, but if you've got a menu panel on your machine, so I went onto our VG2 earlier, and you go into the menu panel and you go to media setting, that will come up with a number of different options for you. So it's going to go through the heater settings, the dryer settings, the head height, I'm reading this off the list, the calibration settings, the media gap adjustment, the cut configuration, the feed for dry options, the dry time, and the dry time for print and cut. You will be able to adjust those settings one by one after another, for the specific material that you've got inside the machine at that point. At the end, it gives you the option to save that as a preset. On most of our devices, you can save up to 8 presets. On the UV devices, you can save up to, I think it's 40 at the moment. So what I can do is put on each of my standard materials, my banner, my vinyl, my heat transfer, my paper, whatever it might be, and go through those media settings for each of my materials. At the end, I just save it as a preset in my menu panel. Next time I want to take off a material and reload a different material, I just go to the menu panel, load the preset, and put in the material. And it's going to have all of the correct settings there ready to go. So something that not many people use, and I don't know why, because I can't imagine most people have got more than 8 materials that they use regularly, but it's just going to save you that bit of time every day. Again, once you put the material on, you go to the menu panel, you load that preset, and all the settings are ready to go. So that's using the presets on your machine in the menu panel. Another quick one again for the VG2. I don't know if you guys know this yet, or if you've got a VG2. When you do a print and cut job, normally when you print and then it's going to wind itself back to cut. So if you've got the middle pinch wheels in, they might wind through the print. And if your print's not 100% dry yet, they could pick up some ink. So again, to save on time, something that the VG2 has, it's a new feature where you have all of the pinch wheels in. What it does is it uses all the pinch wheels when it prints. And then when it's going to wind back and cut, it lifts up the middle pinch wheels so that they don't go through the print. So really handy feature, great for print and cut jobs. Just saves you that little bit of time instead of needing to add that dry time between print and cut jobs. Here's another one for you. I'm just going to bring up a little picture for you. So hopefully you guys can see this print on the screen at the moment, this picture on the screen at the moment, and hopefully this makes a bit of sense. When you're loading the material from the back of your machine on a larger machine, so if you've got again, not the BN20, but if you've got a 30, 54 or 64 or 42 inch machine, somewhere on the back of the machine, you'll have these little marks. On these ones, on the VG2, what you'll see is, if I just draw on here, is you've got these little arrows, okay, which are on the back of the platen. And they are actually, you can probably see faintly up on the top here as well. Okay, some little arrows facing inwards. I'm just drawing them in for you there. Now, so sorry, just hopefully checking that you guys can see that picture and not my screen anymore. That would be great. Those little arrows show you where the ends of your material need to be. So if I've got a 64-inch machine and I only put in a 54-inch material, obviously I've got to line that up so that it's in one of the pinch wheel locations on the front of the machine. So when I'm around the back of the machines, to save me then going around the front, checking whether it's lined up correctly and then walking around the back of the machine, what I can do is line it up on the back and check that my material is within these lines on the back of the machine. So let's just draw that in. So if I've got my material, I want my material to fit somewhere in this gap at the end, meaning that it will line up to a pinch wheel location on the front. Again, it's a very small thing, but it makes a big difference down the line when you keep going around the back and front of your machine trying to align your materials correctly. And that's on pretty much all of our devices. You might not have little arrows. What you might do is have a hole in a sort of little gap in the top of the metal panel along the back of your machine. It depends on which device you've got. But if you go around the back, what you'll see is some little arrows or a hole in the material, in the metal somewhere on the back of the machine, which shows you where to align that from the back. Okay, another little trick is if you do lots of multiple different types of materials and you've got different blades and different blade depths or different pressure settings, or if you do a lot of print, laminate, and then cut, have 2 blade holders. Again, just a very small, quick tip. If you've got one set up for laminated work or one set up for unlaminated, for example, it just stops you having to take out the blade holder, adjust the settings, change the pressure, all the rest of it each time. So what you could do is have one for heat transfer material and one for, I don't know, your wrapping vinyl, whatever it might be. So you can set up each one, and all you've got to do is take out one of your blade holders and pop in the other every time you change the job, and all the sort of blade type or the blade depth will be set for that particular job. So again, just another little cheeky tip, but one that will save you a little bit of time here and there again. All right, finally, we've got 2 other bits. That's my only bits for on the machine at the moment. We've got 2 little bits of software that I'm going to show you. So what we're going to do again is just jump over onto my desktop again. And we're going to now leave VersaWorks, but we're going to go into RolandDG.com. So bear with me a minute. Let's just get up my browser and we'll go to RolandDG.com. Okay, so this is the Roland DG Japanese website, so the HQ website. And at the top here, I can just change it to English. Makes it a bit easier to navigate. And what we're going to do is go to the download section at the top here. Now, this is something that any of you can download, okay, for your devices. So I'm just going to agree to this little warning that pops up. And I'm going to go to color because I've got a color device. Now, for me, I'm going to choose the TrueViz VG2640 because that's the device that I have next door. And in the middle here, you've got something called the Roland OnSupport installer. Okay, so you choose your device and you can download the latest version of a little bit of software called OnSupport. OnSupport is a monitoring software for your machine. So I've got OnSupport open already. So this is where you download it. It's free to use. You download it, install it on your computer. And then what you'll get is a screen looking something like this. Okay. Now this is the OnSupport home screen. And at the top here, you see it says product information. And you can see that I've got the TrueViz VG2 installed because that's the machine that I'm connected to in my VersaWorks. What I can do is add more devices. If I go to edit device management, what I can do here is add devices in a similar method to how I would add them within VersaWorks. Okay, so I can add and take away devices. I can give it a nickname. So I can, if I've got multiples of the same machine, I could have, VG2 number 1 or VG2 in room number 1, whatever it might be, VG2 in another room. So I've got multiples of the same device. I need to make myself the administrator of that machine. So if you're logging yourself into your OnSupport, you can then make yourself the admin of that machine. And that's about it. So I've only got one device connected, but I could connect to multiple devices in Roland because we've got lots next door in the showroom. So I've got my machine set up. And if I go down here, it's got the device. It's got a few bits of information, some documents. Bear with me. Right, so we've got a setup guide. We've got a regular maintenance guide. And if I go to others, I've also got some guides here there's a guide for OnSupport. So if you're having troubles getting set up, there's a guide built into there, which tells you how to set it all up. I've got VersaWorks guides. At the moment, it's only got VersaWorks and VersaWorks Dual. VersaWorks 6 is yet to be added. And the documents that I have here, there aren't too many for the VG2 at the moment because it's such a new device. If you guys have got slightly older devices and you have a look here, you might get a bit more information and a few more help files and documents and things as well. But the key feature of OnSupport is the monitoring side of it. So if I go to OnSupport Mail here, what I can do is go on Edit Settings, and I can set up OnSupport to email me notifications for 4 different events. So what we've got is job started, job finished, emergency stop, and low ink level. And at the top here, I just set up my settings. So I say, I want it to notify me from VG2 notifications, put in my email address, and I choose which of these settings I want it to email me. So job started, pretty simple. Every time somebody starts a job, it'll email you a notification. Job finished, emergency stop, and low ink level. What I can also do is I can create multiples of these notification lists. So maybe I could have one for when I'm on holiday. When I'm on holiday, I need to know every time that my ink is going to run low because I'm going to then order more ink for my team. Or say, for example, I'm just going away for the night, but I really need to know that the job that I'm printing, I need to know that it finishes whilst I'm not there because I've put it on my take-up unit. I could just select job finished and set up a new notification here, come out of here and click run. And it means that that night, when the printer finishes printing, it's going to email me to let me know, or it will email me if there was an emergency stop for any reason. So a really neat tool that you can check basically what's happening in the status of your machine. And if anything should have gone wrong, then I know that I've got to go back to my machine and reprint the job, for example. And then there's an update setting here, so you can just check for any updates. If there's any update available for my machine, so I can either choose OnSupport or my machine. If I choose my machine and I check for an update and a firmware update has been released for my machine, I can run that firmware update via OnSupport and send it to my device, which is really handy as well. So a neat little bit of software that not many people know about, but again, just saving you time each day by basically knowing the status of your machine when you're outside of your business or the office or whatever it might be. So that one was OnSupport. And finally, if we go back into, this is the last one, by the way, if we come back into, I'm just going to play a quick video for you. So hopefully you guys can now see this panel on the screen here. This is something called the Mobile Panel 2. So on your mobile device, if you're on your phone, or maybe if you've got an mobile device, a tablet of some sort, I've got Mobile Panel and I've got Mobile Panel 2. There was a new release for the new machines, but there's also Mobile Panel, which is an app which you can open up on your device. Now, because you're not going to be able to see that on my screen, I just recorded on my screen on my phone and uploaded it here. So this is for the newer devices that have Bluetooth. You can control the machine from a mobile device. So if you've got can't remember which devices all have it. Went back maybe to RF maybe, and then the VGs or the VG2 have it. Double check, but I think it was the VGs and the VG2s and the SGs. I've got this little mobile panel. So I just made a quick recording. I'm just going to talk through it as we go through. So first of all, this is what it looks like from the home panel. It's basically a slightly more advanced version of the menu panel on your machine, but it means you can do it all whilst you're sat on the sofa. Save you some effort of getting up and pushing buttons. So this is what it looks like. Hopefully this video will play. There we go. I can choose my device, which one I'm connected to. You can have multiple devices connected. Top right-hand corner, if I click on that option, it's got base point, test print, pause, setup, cleaning options, test cut, sheet cut, and turning the power off. So just your kind of normal function menu options. Then we've got the status of the machine, which shows you how much ink is remaining, the printer temperature and the dryer temperature, also how much ink has been put into your waste ink bottle, and how much ink, media there is left if you set that up. In the media settings, you've got the batch media settings, heater settings, print head height, feed calibration, basically any of the tests that you can do for your material. And you can set those up via the app. Cleaning options, your normal ones, normal cleaning or the manual cleaning set up as well. So the normal cleaning options. Maintenance options, replacing your wiper, cutting replacement, tray cleaning, any of the maintenance stuff that you can do via the main menu as well. And then we've got your presets. So we talked about presets earlier, and I said that you can change these presets and you can set them up as well via the preset box. There is an explanation down the bottom there as well, detailed explanation, which will talk you through how you need to use these presets as well. So super easy to use. Great if you've got a slightly larger mobile device as well, when you can see these a bit easier, but especially for people who aren't used to using the menu panel on the machine, a great and easy way to set it up. Then there's some other settings: test print position, preheating, edge detection, sticking prevention, cleaning while printing, sheet length registration. Most of these are within the main menu panel as well, but these are just easier ways of getting them and a little bit more visual. Sometimes they come with a bit more explanation than they do in the menu panel. So that's called the mobile panel. You can get it via your app store for your mobile devices. Okay. That's it. That's it for my list that I was going to go through. Just a bunch of little, hopefully easy, small changes. Those will make a difference for you at least. Maybe not, if not more.